Lady in White. Have you ever felt like you're being watched when you're completely alone? That feeling of invisible eyes staring at you from the dark corner of the room, or a soul trying to reach you from the other side. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, because these stories will make you never sleep alone again. The dim lights reflected off the crystal surface of the whiskey glass. Ethan Gray, a 28-year-old American photographer, sat alone at the bar of La Biela, one of Buenos Aires' most famous cafes. He had arrived in Argentina 2 weeks ago to work on a photography project documenting South American classical architecture. Tonight, after a long day shooting under the city's harsh sunlight, Ethan had decided to stop by this bar to unwind. He took a sip of his drink, feeling the liquor burn gently in his throat. Traditional Argentine tango music floated through the space. The bar wasn't packed, but most tables were occupied. Small groups engaged in lively conversation, laughing and enjoying their Friday night. Ethan scrolled through his phone, reviewing the photographs he had captured during the day. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over him. Ethan felt as if he was being observed. He looked up from his phone screen and glanced around the bar. His eyes settled on a far corner where a young woman was looking in his direction. She was strangely beautiful. Long black hair fell past her shoulders, porcelain white skin, and deep black eyes stared directly at him. She wore an elegant white blouse, simple yet incredibly refined. When their eyes met, the woman smiled slightly. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. There was something about this woman that made it impossible to look away. She raised her glass as if in greeting, though there was no drink on her table. Her lips moved as if saying a word that Ethan couldn't read from this distance. The woman then lowered her head, her hair falling forward to partially hide her face, as if suddenly shy under his attention. Ethan decided to approach her, but when he stood up and looked back to where the woman had been sitting, she was nowhere to be seen. He frowned, scanning the crowd for that distinctive white blouse. Strange, he whispered to himself. Where did she go? He was about to return to his seat when he was startled to find the woman standing right beside him. Up close, she was even more beautiful. There was something unusual about her skin, two pale eyes, too deep, and an indescribable sadness in her gaze. "Hello," she said in English with a gentle Argentine accent. "I'm Valentina. I saw you from across the room." They began to talk. Ethan offered Valentina a glass of famous Argentine red wine, but throughout their conversation, which lasted over an hour, she never once touched her drink. Ethan couldn't help but notice this, but he was too caught up in his own stories about his photography work, the places he had traveled, what he loved about Buenos Aires. "Is this your first trip to South America?" Valentina asked, her voice soft as a breeze. "Yes, and I've fallen in love with this place," Ethan replied, unable to ignore that the girl hardly said anything about herself. Whenever he asked, she would just smile and skillfully change the subject. There was a mystery about Valentina that made Ethan increasingly curious. He couldn't guess her age. She could be in her 20s, but sometimes, especially when she gazed into the distance, she seemed much older, as if she had witnessed too much in life. "It's getting late," Ethan said after noticing the bar had emptied considerably. "May I walk you home?" Valentina was silent for a moment before nodding. "I enjoy walking. Would you like to walk with me for a while? Buenos Aires nights are beautiful." They left the bar around 1 a.m. The air outside was surprisingly cold, a chilly wind making Ethan shiver. He looked at Valentina, who was only wearing her thin white blouse. She began to tremble. "You're cold," Ethan said with concern and removed his leather jacket. "Here, put this on." Valentina accepted with a grateful smile. As she draped the jacket over her shoulders, Ethan noticed her skin was ice cold when his hand accidentally brushed against hers. On the empty street under the streetlights, they walked in silence. "You seem different from others who visit here," Valentina suddenly said, her voice almost a whisper. "How so?" Ethan looked at her intrigued. "There's a loneliness in you," she replied. "Do you believe in the existence of souls, Ethan?" The question surprised him. I'm not sure. I've never thought much about it." "I do," Valentina said, her voice becoming distant. "I believe there are souls that cannot depart because they have unfinished business." "Or because they are too lonely," They turned onto another street. Ethan realized they were heading toward the famous Recoleta Cemetery, one of the world's most beautiful and eerie burial grounds. Moonlight cast over the ancient tombs, creating strange shadows. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked, feeling slightly anxious. "My home is near here," Valentina answered, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring intently at the cemetery. As they passed the cemetery gates, Valentina suddenly stopped. She turned to look at Ethan, and in the moonlight he noticed something had changed in her eyes. They were empty, as if looking through him. "I have to go," she said, her voice suddenly urgent. "Now I thought we were going to your home." Valentina didn't answer. She abruptly turned and began running toward the cemetery. "Valentina!" Ethan called and chased after her. But she was strangely fast, and in the blink of an eye she disappeared into the darkness of the cemetery. Ethan stopped at the gate, breathing heavily. He looked into the darkness ahead, feeling a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "Did she run into the cemetery?" he asked himself, feeling bewildered. Just then a man appeared from the shadows. He wore the uniform of a cemetery guard, a half-smoked cigarette in his hand. "Have you seen a young woman run in here?" Ethan asked in English mixed with the few Spanish words he knew. "She's wearing white and my jacket." The man looked at Ethan with a strange expression, not answering immediately. He took a long drag from his cigarette, then slowly exhaled. "What did she look like?" the man asked in return in English with a heavy Argentine accent. Ethan described Valentina in detail, her long black hair, pale skin, sad eyes, the thin white blouse, and the black leather jacket he had lent her. As Ethan spoke, the man gradually changed his attitude, his face shifting from indifference to a strange smile and finally to a grave expression. "You are not the first to see her," the man said solemnly. "Follow me." The man opened the cemetery gate and gestured for Ethan to follow. Initially, Ethan hesitated, but curiosity and concern for Valentina drove him to enter. Recoleta Cemetery was famous for its luxurious tombs, designed like small houses or miniature temples. In the moonlight, they formed a miniature city for the dead, with small winding paths between the tombs. "You're a foreigner, yes?" the man asked as they walked deeper into the cemetery. "Yes, I'm from the United States." "Then perhaps you haven't heard of La Dama de Blanco, the Lady in White?" Ethan shook his head. "It's a famous legend in Buenos Aires," the man continued, "about a young girl with leukemia. She knew she was going to die, but she had never been in love. So sometimes she returns to the world of the living, seeking the love she never had a chance to experience." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as they ventured deeper into the maze of tombs. He began to feel as if he was being watched from all sides, as if thousands of invisible eyes were staring at him from the darkness. "I don't understand," Ethan said, trying to stay calm. "Valentina. She's just a girl I met at the bar." "Valentina Núñez," the man said, as if confirming. 20 years old, literature student at the University of Buenos Aires. Dreamed of becoming a writer. Died in 1998 from leukemia. Ethan felt as if someone had just poured a bucket of ice over him. "That's impossible. I just talked to her. She was real. She was warm." "Did she drink anything?" the man asked. Ethan recalled the untouched glass of red wine. "No." "And did she talk much about herself?" "No, she mostly listened to me talk." The man nodded as if he knew the answer before asking. "That's how they work. Souls. They cannot consume the food or drink of the living, and they like to listen to stories about life, something they no longer have." Ethan wanted to protest, wanted to say all this was absurd, but he couldn't explain Valentina's disappearance into the cemetery, her ice-cold skin, or her mysterious silence. They stopped before a white marble mausoleum. Not as large or luxurious as many others in the cemetery, but with a simple and elegant beauty. Atop the mausoleum was a marble statue of a young woman lying as if in peaceful sleep. Ethan moved closer, and in the moonlight he recognized the face of the statue. It was Valentina, every feature, every detail identical to the girl he had met at the bar. On one stone hand of the statue, curled as if a precious gift, was Ethan's leather jacket. Ethan felt his knees weaken. He sat down in front of the mausoleum, unable to take his eyes off his own jacket on the statue's hand. This is impossible," he stammered. The man stood behind him, still smoking. "Every year on the night she died, tonight she returns. She seeks someone who will listen to her story, someone who will give her the feeling of being alive again, if only for one night." "But she didn't tell me her story," Ethan protested. "Because you weren't ready to hear it," the man said. "Or perhaps she thought you wouldn't believe." Ethan reached out to touch the jacket. It was real and still warm from his body heat. He felt a chill run through him as he realized that all of this was true. He had spent an evening with a soul. Ethan read the tombstone Valentina Núñez, 1978 to 1998. Un sueño interrumpido, un amor no encontrado. An interrupted dream, a love never found. She died so young, Ethan said, feeling a deep sadness. "That's why she cannot depart," the man explained. "She had too many things left unexperienced, too much love unfelt." Just then, Ethan felt a cold breeze behind him. He turned and saw Valentina standing there still in her white blouse, no longer wearing his jacket. In the moonlight, she looked almost transparent. "You found me," she said, her voice like an echo from far away. "Valentina, I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you have sad eyes," she answered. "Like mine. And because you're also searching for something just like me." Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked from Valentina to the statue on the mausoleum, then back to Valentina. Both were perfectly identical. "I want to show you something," Valentina said and held out her hand. Ethan hesitated but then took her hand. It was cold, but not the cold of death, rather a cool sensation like fresh water on a hot summer day. Valentina led him to another corner of the mausoleum where there was a small glass window looking inside. Ethan peered through the glass and saw a small room inside the mausoleum. On a stand was a dark wooden coffin. "This is where I sleep," Valentina said, her voice a whisper. "For 27 years now." Ethan felt a chill run through him. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand," Valentina said, her eyes looking directly into his. "I want you to know how thin the boundary between life and death is. Tonight I could touch you, talk to you, almost be alive. But tomorrow I return to darkness." Valentina moved closer to Ethan. In the moonlight he could see through her, as if she was gradually becoming transparent. "I only have an hour before dawn," she said, "before I must return." "Return? In there?" Ethan asked, looking toward the coffin. Valentina nodded. "But before that I want to tell you my story. The story I never had a chance to tell anyone." And so, under the moonlight in Recoleta Cemetery, Valentina told Ethan about her brief life, about her dreams of becoming a writer, the books she loved, her family, and how she discovered she had leukemia. She told him about the fear of knowing she was going to die, about the loneliness in her final days at the hospital, and about what she regretted most, never having loved and been loved. "That's why I come back," she concluded, "to seek a love I never found while alive. But instead I found you someone who understands loneliness as I understand it." "I'm not lonely," Ethan objected, though he knew it was a lie. "Ethan," Valentina said gently, "I can see it in your eyes. You travel the world photographing strange places, but you've never really felt like you belong anywhere. You're also searching for something just like me." Ethan couldn't deny the truth in her words. There was an emptiness in his life, a void that no trip or photography project could fill. "There's another reason I chose you tonight," Valentina said, her voice becoming more serious. "To warn you." "Warn me about what?" "About the path you're on," she said. "You become so immersed in your work and adventures that you've forgotten what's most important: connecting with others, building real relationships." Valentina placed a cold hand on Ethan's cheek. "Don't wait until it's too late like I did. Don't let regret be the only thing left when it all ends." The eastern sky began to lighten, signaling the approaching dawn. Valentina looked in that direction, and Ethan could see the sadness flooding her eyes. "It's time for me to go," she said. "Can I see you again?" Ethan asked suddenly, feeling reluctant to let her leave. Valentina smiled sadly. "Perhaps, if you return on this night next year. But Ethan, I hope you won't need to seek out a ghost to feel less alone anymore." She moved closer and gently touched her lips to his. The kiss was cold, yet strangely warm. "Live, Ethan," she whispered. "Live for the part of life that I never had the chance to live." With those words, Valentina slowly dissolved in the first light of dawn. Ethan stood there alone beside the mausoleum, with the stone statue still holding his jacket. The cemetery guard had long disappeared, as if he had never been there. Ethan wondered if all of this was real or just a dream. He left the cemetery, stepping onto the streets of Buenos Aires that were gradually awakening. When he turned back to look at the cemetery gate one last time, he saw a faint silhouette of a girl in white, waving goodbye. Ethan jumped when his phone rang. It was a message from his mother, someone he hadn't contacted in many months. "Son, I miss you. When are you coming home?" He looked at the message, then back at the cemetery where Valentina's figure had vanished. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt something inside him break open. "Thank you, Valentina," he whispered into the air, and began typing a response to his mother. That night, when the new cemetery guard came on shift, he found a bouquet of fresh flowers placed on Valentina Núñez's tomb, along with a photograph of her mausoleum in the dawn light, a perfect piece of art by an anonymous photographer. Behind the photo was a simple line, "For the one who taught me that love exists even after death." But the strangest thing the guard noticed was that the leather jacket on the statue's hand had disappeared as if it had never been there. 1 year later, Ethan returned to Buenos Aires, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought his sister, with whom he had reconnected after years of distant communication. As they approached Recoleta Cemetery at dusk on the anniversary of Valentina's death, his sister asked why this place was so important to him. "I met someone here who changed my life," was all he said. That night, as his sister slept in their hotel room, Ethan slipped out and returned to the cemetery. He brought a new leather jacket, which he carefully placed at the foot of Valentina's statue. He sat there in silence until midnight, when he felt a familiar cold breeze. "You came back," Valentina said, appearing beside him, still young, still beautiful in her white blouse. "I wanted to thank you properly," Ethan replied. "You were right about everything." Valentina smiled, a genuine smile without the sadness he had seen before. "Tell me about your year among the living." And so he did, telling her about reconnecting with his family, about slowing down his frantic travel schedule, about learning to build deeper connections. As he spoke, he noticed something changing in Valentina. Her form seemed less transparent, her eyes more peaceful. When dawn approached and it was time for her to leave again, she touched his hand one last time. "Perhaps I won't be here next year," she said. "Perhaps I won't need to be." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "Some souls remain because they have lessons to teach," she explained. "Once the lesson is learned and passed on, we can finally rest." 5 years later, Ethan published a book titled La Dama de Blanco, Love Beyond Time, which became a global bestseller. In the dedication, there was just a simple sentence, "For V, who saved me from death while no longer living herself." The book touched millions of readers around the world, many of whom began visiting Valentina's tomb in Recoleta Cemetery. They would leave notes, flowers, and tokens of love, physical manifestations of how her story had changed their lives too. The cemetery guard noticed something remarkable after the book's publication. The marble statue of Valentina never again held a leather jacket on the anniversary of her death. Instead, it would sometimes be found holding a white rose, though no one ever saw who placed it there. "Sometimes the dead return not to haunt us, but to save us from ourselves," Ethan wrote in the final pages of his book. "The boundary between our world and theirs is thinner than we imagine, especially for those of us walking through life with our eyes closed." And in Buenos Aires, as new visitors discover Recoleta Cemetery each day, guides now tell the story of La Dama de Blanco, the soul who taught a lonely photographer how to truly live, and in doing so finally found her own peace.